This is my first video about motion, and I'm going to go through the basics like the center of gravity, the base of support, etc. And it's in my new book, Ellen's Guide to Rhythm and Motion on Amazon. To understand motion, we have to start with the center of gravity, which is located in the middle of the pelvis, an inch below the belly button, and it's where the mass of the body is concentrated. It changes when the body position changes, but I'm not going to change it. I'm going to keep it in the pelvis so that I can better explain movement, and I'll call this the pelvic center of gravity. Now, the base of support in all of these cases are the 2 feet, and you can see that there's a gravity line down from the center of gravity that lands between the 2 feet, indicating that the lower part of each of these figures is balanced. Here, the 2 feet and the line from the center of gravity runs right between them. Let's see how the upper body is balanced or not. In this first case, if we extend this line of gravity up, it hits the eye of this figure. So the back part of his head probably weighs about the same as the front part and the package. In the second case, this line of gravity divides his head and some of his body on one side and the package on the other side, so they must be equal. In the third one, these books are probably about as heavy as this book bag. And in the fourth one, we have 2/3 of the globe on one side, 1/3 of the globe in the man's head and most of his body on the other side. This final one is not balanced in the upper body. We only see a little bit of the package on one side, and we see most of the package and most of the body on the other side. So this figure should fall forward. Look at these 2 boxes on the incline, and which one do you think is more stable? I think you would agree that this blue box looks more stable than the red one. And the blue box is more likely to run downhill than the red one. So why is that? Well, first of all, the blue box has a lower center of gravity, and that's why it's more stable, because it's closer to the ground, whereas this red one is higher up. The blue box has a large base, whereas the red one has a narrow base, and its axis leans toward the direction of motion, whereas the red axis is vertical. So if we compare the blue box to a good skier, the good skier is low, has a low center of gravity, and he's leaning down the hill, whereas a bad skier has a higher center of gravity, and this person is more vertical. As a result, he is likely to fall backwards if his skis go forward too much, and he will be circling around his center of gravity. What else rotates around its center of gravity? Well, a hammer rotates around its center of gravity, which is this blue dot, and it follows a parabolic curve. A ballerina also rotates around her center of gravity, which is above her standing foot, and it is anchored by the male dancer's hand. Her body goes up and down like a lever. When her head is down, her back leg is up. This skater's center of gravity is this blue dot, and it's over her standing left foot. If you pushed her above her center of gravity, she might rotate around her center of gravity and fall forward. If you pushed her legs would probably slip forward and rotate around the center of gravity, so she would fall backwards. If you push her at the center of gravity, she would skate forward. Now, this guy on the bicycle on a wire holds a long pole at his center of gravity around his waist, and it's perpendicular to the wire. The pole is weighed down on both ends, which is why it bends, and that pulls the center of gravity of the bike, the person, and the pole down closer to the wire. And this lower center of gravity helps stabilize the man. Now, if he were holding the pole above his head, he would be more likely to circle around his center of gravity and tip over. Let's compare the stability of this first guy to the instability of the second one. So the center of gravity in the first case is closer to the ground than the center of gravity here. In addition, the first one has a larger base of support that goes from his hands to his feet, creating a rectangular base of support, which is a very wide base. The second one, his base of support is on his toe, so it's very narrow. Now, the line from the center of gravity, this blue line for the first man, hits his base of support around here. But the blue line from this guy's center of gravity goes behind the base. Now, I added another line, which is the line from the head, because the head is really heavy. And for this first one, that line hits his base of support. But for the second one, the line from his head lands behind his base of support. So he's unbalanced in this direction. So he will have a tendency to rotate in this direction around his center of gravity. And that's worsened by the fact that he kicked up his leg, because that gives him momentum to circle around. Let's evaluate this figure where the center of gravity is about here and the line of gravity hits his base. When we go upward, we see that most of the package is on one side and his head and his upper body are on the other side. And so that gives you an idea as to how heavy this package is. Now, this water skier has to push with his feet enough so that he doesn't get pulled forward by the pull of the boat. And his body is almost perpendicular to these two forces, which is the best way to resist any force. For example, an axe has a handle that's perpendicular to that axe. So when you have force on the axe, the perpendicular handle can handle it the best. Now, what about this guy? What I did here is drew the base and then drew the blue line through the base. And we see now that his head and his feet are on one side of this line of balance, and his center of gravity is on the other side. This shows all the elements we've discussed so far. So we have the pelvic center of gravity and the base where the feet touch the ground, and the line of gravity coming down from the center of gravity, and then also a line of gravity from the head. And I'm going to add one more, which is the axis of the body, which is important in movement and in weight distribution. Now, if this figure weren't leaning against the wall, he would be unstable because the line of gravity from his head doesn't touch his base. So the head isn't being supported. And also because of this diagonal axis, so that he has more body weight over here than he does over here. The figure doesn't move if forces on either side are equal, meaning the force of him leaning against the wall versus gripping the ground. But if anything disturbs that equilibrium, like a moving wall or a slippery floor, he would rotate around his center of gravity and fall. I have lots of videos about motion, and I can't wait to tell you all the great things I've learned since I wrote this book.